The Satanists wanted to install their own tribute, a pagan idol, on the Capitol grounds, right next to the Ten Commandments.
Billions around the planet are witnessing a world in the grasp of sadistic spiritual darkness. This unholy alliance has infected our governments, our religious institutions, and our societies. The world appears to be unraveling. But can the evil behind these dark supernatural forces be defeated? Is everything playing out just as the Bible predicted it will in the final days? At last, you can know the answers to mankind's most urgent questions and learn your destiny among today's events in the new, unprecedented work taking the prophecy world by storm. Gods and Thrones, Nakash, Forgotten Prophecy, and the Return of the Elohim by best-selling author, former decorated law enforcement officer, and senior pastor Carl Gallups. This changes everything. Available now wherever fine books are sold.
Through today, we didn't get here overnight. We got here by way of a process. And part of that process, I believe, integral to what we're seeing happen today is, of course, the consequence of having an infiltration in America, inside the White House. And to explain that, where the investigation exists with respect to the forgery, the 5 points of forgery, a document that's been proven to be a forgery, and the consequences we're seeing is Carl Gallups and Mike Zullo. And folks, you know Carl Gallups. By the way, his book, Gods and Thrones, Defender of Publishing. My goodness, if you don't have a copy of his book, Gods and Thrones, you've got to get it. What an incredible book. I've got it right here. Joe and I have read it. It's really one of the, I believe, one of the most important reads with respect to current events, and it just really maps out, provides a roadmap of things that we have seen and things yet to come, and that's Gods and Thrones by Carl Gallups. And Mike Zullo, I'm sure everyone knows who Mike Zullo is. He's an investigator. He worked for the cold case posse. He was worked for Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Arizona. And folks, Mike Zullo has investigated the NSA surveillance of Donald Trump, and of course the people around Donald Trump, the authenticity, as I mentioned before, of Barack Obama's birth certificate, that document itself. And he was the commander, by the way, and chief investigator of the cold case posse, under which this investigation was conducted. Now he's returning, of course, tonight to talk about this and where we are today, both him and Carl Gallups. And it's such a pleasure to have them. Eric, I didn't see you. Are they on? Okay. So they'll be on with us momentarily. But I wanted to get their introductions out of the way, because what they've got to say is so important, I believe, and both Joe and I believe, to what we're seeing today. Because if you have an infiltration of government, isn't that kind of what we're seeing? Isn't that what we've seen with the head of the CIA to some extent with respect to John Brennan? Everything we're seeing today is, again, as I said, it didn't happen overnight, and I believe it's a consequence or a direct result of having someone in the White House, in the Oval Office, having access to our most the position of leadership, and setting the stage. Look at what Obama did with respect to the power structure of the Middle East between him and Hillary Clinton. Look at what happened. Yeah. So I mean,
and it's amazing. After Obama's out of office, we see significant defeats of ISIS. Obviously, there's still a Syrian civil war, But what Obama and Hillary should have been indicted just for what they did to the Middle East, just for her comment of, we came, we saw, he died. I mean, what kind of monster? Even if it is
That's
a dictator,
true.
I mean, just her demeanor about the whole thing, like she was giddy about overthrowing a president of a country who was trying to help its own citizens.
And Gaddafi was providing us with intelligence, Joe. Providing us with intelligence. He was cooperating in the war terror.
It's said because he wanted to move away from the dollar and move towards a gold for oil type trading platform. We know that he wasn't, a good or great man, but he did do a lot for his citizens. There was a couple videos that showed some of the things he did, like give married couples a car and $50,000. I don't know. He was it was crazy because it wasn't just and Assad. Look at Assad. They tore this country in half, caused hundreds of thousands of deaths. Couldn't even get Assad out of power, but they didn't care. They continued from Egypt to Libya, to Syria, which is still ongoing. The death and destruction that they have caused is unbelievable, and nobody's in trouble over it.
Well, of course not, and that was, it's not just Obama. Of course, it transcends the right-left paradigm or right-left model. But bottom line here, you have to take a look at Obama with respect to his background. And I look at Obama as a Trojan horse. And we've had Dr. Jerome Corsi on, and of course we've had Mike Zullo and Carl Gallups on right after their the press conference where the 5 points of forgery were explained, disclosed. My goodness, the media missing in action. And this was an investigation that had a conclusion. Now, we do have with us right now, as I mentioned before, best-selling author, Carl Gallups, Gods and Thrones. Oh, my goodness, a follow-up is coming to that, too. But Gods and Thrones, a tremendous work, a tremendous book. And, of course, the link to that book is in the program description. And investigator Mike Zullo, we have them both. Let's bring them both on. And Carl, we're going to toss it to you, sir, for the requisite introductions.
Okay, well, hey, thanks, Doug and Joe. It's such an honor to be with you again, and I'm so glad we were able to get Mike Zullo to give us some of his time. I'm thrilled about this show. This is a 6-hour show tonight, right?
We can make it into one.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. And listen, thank you for your kind words about my book too. I appreciate that. I'm just thrilled with what the Lord is doing with that. But I'm looking forward to the show.
We are too. And by the way, Gods and Thrones, a brilliant work, groundbreaking stuff. So folks, if you don't have it, Gods and Thrones is the title. Carl Gallups is the author, and it will change your worldview. I guarantee it. But Carl, set the stage, and Mike Zullo, welcome as well to the HAGMANN Report, and thanks for coming back and your gift of time.
Thank you for having us this evening.
I will set the stage, guys, and thank you. And let me just say this, and Mike Zullo knows that I mean this with all sincerity. I'm not trying to be falsely humble. I mean this. I will participate as much as you want, but it won't hurt my feelings if I participate very little. Most of the people want to hear, all of the people want to hear mainly from Mike Zullo because he has a wealth of information in this 5-year criminal investigation, forensically proven criminal investigation, in which he was working in an official capacity as Sheriff Arpaio's personal investigator. Started off as the lead investigator of the cold case posse, and then from there it was moved right into Mike Zullo's lap and to use whatever resources he was able to use, and he did. And this investigation covered this period of 5 years. It took Mike Zullo all over the United States. It took him into some situations of interviewing witnesses. It took him into the situation of into Washington, D.C., into the National Archives. It took him into the situation of right into the Department of Health in Hawaii, speaking with high-ranking officials, taking their witness information. It took him right into to NSA agents, employees. If I say anything wrong, Mike can correct me here, but it took him there. It took him into a lengthy investigation with a CIA contract worker, whistleblower, informant.
Dennis Montgomery. Dennis Montgomery, right?
Yeah. And Mike will fill you in on all those details. So, and then it took him into lengthy participation with two different international document examination entities, both of them used to train law enforcement around the world, both of them certified to testify in the highest courts of their lands around the world, both of them highly documented and respected. And then, of course, the last press conference that Sheriff Arpaio and Mike Zullo conducted in December 2016, that was when Mike and I came on right after that press conference, did a 2-hour show and a recap for you on that. Where all of this was presented in video evidence, in video format. The evidence was presented. So in the meantime, here we are now, and the stage is being set like this. So people that are familiar with this, and I'm going to hush in a moment. Mike's going to get into all the details, and we've got a fascinating show, folks. We've got clips to play and all kinds of things. But the bottom line is, so after all of this stage has been set, people have been asking, well, how come nothing's being done? Why isn't Congress dealing with it? Why didn't the FBI deal with it? Why isn't the DOJ dealing with it? Well, think about it. Until this last 1 year, 8 years prior, who were we going to take this to over the last 5 years? To Obama's DOJ? To the White House? To the FBI with James Comey in charge of it? To the federal courts that were stacked for Obama? To the media that we now know is completely fake news and stacked towards Obama and the leftists and the communists and the subversives? Where were we going to take it? So in the meantime, the man that poked his finger in the chest of Barack Obama back in 2010, early 2011, daring him, if you will, to put a long-form birth certificate up on the White House website or somewhere to show, because there was nothing but a little short form that had all kind of problems with it, and the nation was already in an uproar about it. And so it was Donald Trump, the businessman, the billionaire businessman who was a friend of Joe Arpaio and other important people. He had access to information. He knew what was going on with this birth certificate. He poked his finger in his chest, and Obama finally put up what we now know as the long-form birth certificate, which, by the way, Mike Zullo will go into this in great detail, regardless, even if it is a copy, let's say, of a legitimate document, which it is not, but even if it was, it means nothing. It's a PDF of a photo of something. But now, of course, we have the forensic evidence that Mike will explain, proving that it was built from the ground up on a blank template. We even have one of the documents with which was used to build the template. But now the point I'm trying to make is, but now we're 1 year into the presidency. Donald Trump, the guy who is responsible that thing was placed up there. Of course, he's fighting his wars with the deep state, but he's, making court appointments. He's cleaning the house. He's draining the swamp. We're getting some better Congress people in there. He's outed the media for what they are. Some of them are kind of melting away like the Wicked Witch of the West. So things are happening. Things are shaping up. We've got the midterms coming. We've got the whole fake Mueller investigation, the Trump dossier. We've got the leaked FBI texts and documents. In the meantime, Mike Zullo, Sheriff Arpaio, and I, because of my indirect contact with all of this investigation, we knew years ago that three-letter agencies were involved in this obfuscation of the birth certificate. We knew that three-letter agencies of the government were spying on U.S. citizens, even particularly important ones. We called some of them by name: Donald Trump when he was still a citizen, Chief Justice Roberts, and media figures, Michael Savage and others, Alex Jones and others. We knew that. We knew that all of this was going on. We knew the media was absolutely fake media and that it was an obfuscation wall for Barack Obama. We knew that that there was a piece of software that the CIA had invented or its contract workers had invented to hammer in to election agencies of various states, or to hammer into government agencies. Mike Zullo will tell your audience about some information we have about CIA trails of ISP addresses from the CIA into Hawaii Department of Health and the University of Hawaii, and into servers in Jakarta, Indonesia. So we've been knowing all of this, but there was nowhere to take it. There was nothing we could do with it in any kind of a way to getting some kind of judgment upon it. But things are changing, is what I'm saying, guys. So anyway, that's enough of a setup. The people want to hear from Mike Zullo, and he's got some details, so I'll hush.
Well, thank you, Carl. Mike, we're going to turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Carl. Thanks for that recap. I mean, really, where do you begin with this? This has been a nightmare plaguing the majority of Americans for 8-9 years now. I think this is going on, because it was going on way before we ever got involved. The sheriff's office, Sheriff Arpaio, and I got involved in 2011. In December of last year, or the year prior, I'm sorry, we presented our findings after 5 years of investigating this, and have determined with forensic expert analysis. And what we did, we determined early on that this was going to be viewed as nothing more than political fodder. And there were going to be accusations back and forth that this is nothing more than politics. So what I decided to do is reach out and locate two distinctly different forensic laboratories. One, a court-certified document examiner, actually located in Hawaii, actually someone who voted for Barack Obama, court-recognized expert, and I went overseas to Italy and made contact with an Italian firm who specializes in digital forensics, mainly computer child pornography cases. They trained law enforcement over there on those techniques. And what I did is I took our findings, I took the PDF file, I sent it to both of these entities simultaneously, neither of them knowing about the other, and asked them to perform their due diligence and tell me the facts about the document and give me their verdict. Is it authentic or is it not? Both of them, without knowing of the existence of one another, the document examiner in Hawaii declared it to be an outright fraud, and the digital forensics team in Italy have concluded, based on their sampling size, that it is 1,000 times more probable that the document was fraudulently created, that it is inauthentic and unreliable. I don't know what else anyone can humanly do to put themselves in such a neutral position and allow the document to rise or fall on its own weight, but that's what I did. Those findings were released. It was a press conference here in Arizona. About the only place you're going to find the whole press conference is on YouTube at this point. That press conference was televised. We were made aware that Fox National was watching it. And when it was all said and done, if it was even mentioned on mainstream media or cable news networks, it was about Sheriff Arpaio losing his re-election bid after 20 years. And they made no mention of the findings, just that he has wrapped up his investigation into that document. No one will put the findings out there.
Yeah.
And I challenge anybody to challenge them. The findings what are.
Well, and I would just say the findings are so condemning, and they're damning, and I use that word not as a curse word in its proper context. The findings, I mean, it's amazing, guys. You've seen the evidence. I mean, if you can watch the videos, you can see how it's done, how almost a dozen elements were lifted from one document that we actually possess, this document, lifted in perfect mathematical juxtaposition to each other, and placed perfectly on a blank template to produce the Obama birth certificate. One of the elements is so outrageously obvious. Really, all of them are once you see the video. But one of them is an X that's placed in a box that checks yes or no. The X just outside of the box, the ink splattered onto the word above it. And you know, Doug and Joe, that ink splatters are like fingerprints. I mean, no two are alike. And so that box was lifted onto the blank template, not in one place, but it was used in two places. I mean, what's the chances that the exact falling of the typewriter into a box would place an X in the exact same spot with the exact same ink splatter one time, much less two times on the same document? And then when you figure that even if that could happen, which it can't, how do you explain the fact that there are 10 other elements that also just happen to line up mathematically juxtaposed perfectly? And again, 2 document experts signed off on this. Bottom line, guys, and we've got some fresh and some new stuff to tell you in a little bit, but the bottom line is, guys, Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio have always said, and me too, but I mean, they're the most important because they're the actual investigators, all we want is the truth. There's no political attachment to this. We just want to know, has our Constitution been violated? Has our nation been violated? White House been violated? Has the U.S. military been violated with the commander-in-chief that gained that office on a fake ID, regardless of where he was born? This was never about a birther investigation. It was about that birth certificate. And all Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio have ever asked for is for Congress to investigate it, prove them wrong. They're willing to be proven wrong. Mike Zullo's willing to be proven wrong. Now, you have to do it forensically, and it has to be done in context. You can't just look at it and say, we don't believe this. But go do the same forensics. Pay the same kind of money that was paid to those agencies. Take the months and months of investigation. Take the 5 years of interviewing witnesses and experts and bring back a finding. But now Mike has said that, listen, if this thing was to go before Congress with all the evidence that he's already collected, it would literally take less than 1 day to air this thing out and prove it right or wrong. I mean, with the power that Congress has, the subpoena power, it would take a day, maybe 2 days total to bring this thing to a finality. But here's the thing that is so stinking obvious about it. No court will hear it. No Congress has heard it. No 3-letter federal law enforcement agency has heard it. And after Mike tells you some stuff, you'll know why. But no major media outlet has laid out the evidence. Oh, they'll trash it. They'll talk about it. They'll talk about how, well, Arpaio, he's a birther. Mike Zullo, yeah, they had another press conference, and it's the same old stuff. That's a lie. Not only was it not the same old stuff, but the stuff they presented before was enough to open a congressional investigation, and it was never done. But the last stuff that they offered was earth-shattering, and the information that goes deeper than what they presented is truly universe-shattering. And Mike is sitting on that, and Sheriff Arpaio is sitting on that. And there are others that have it for safekeeping in case something happens to Mike or Sheriff Arpaio. But no one will even listen to it, guys. It's surreal. And they don't say that we're not going to listen to it because we think it's fake. They just put their fingers in their ears and their hands over their eyes and say, no, we don't want to look at it. I mean, guys, this is ages against the United States of America, and I'm convinced it is the foundation to what we're watching in the headline news every day right now about Trump, the obfuscation of all of that, the dossier, the fake charges, the fake investigation. We can talk more about that later, but that's the deal. All Mike Zullo wants, and all Sheriff Arpaio wants, and all the American people, the millions of us that know about this, all we want is for some congressional committee to have the guts to say, you know what? This could be huge. We need to look at it.
Exactly. And I know that you're going to get into this later, but people might ask, well, gee whiz, Obama's out of office. Why are you so, what difference does it make today? Well, we know the answer to that question. Of course, this is the golden thread that really is directing events today. But and of course, you referenced the 2 document examiners, Forlab and Reed Hayes, and of course, the press conference that you held on December 15th, 2016, and graciously came on our program a couple of days or the day after that. So 9 points of forgery verified through your investigation, and yet Congress is AWOL with respect to taking this home. So here we are. Fantastic summary to this point as to where we're at.
Mike?
Well, I think what's paramount in this type of investigation is a lot of it was done in the public eye over the internet. People had started to do this before Sheriff Arpaio got involved in it. People were out there challenging the certificate, and a lot of this information was digested, outside of the purview of law enforcement. And that actually poses a problem for law enforcement, because opinions were already made, information was being provided back and forth amongst these people, point, counterpoint was going on, obfuscation was going on, outright lying about facts were happening. Well, what the public has to understand is, yes, we presented just the findings in that press conference. Public has to understand is there are more than just the physical findings that matter.
Yes.
What matters, and Doug and Joe, you guys know this. Carl, you know this. You're a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Circumstantial fact, circumstantial evidence, timelines, statements made to the public, statements made from officials, all of that information is creditable from an aspect of it leads you to the same conclusion that you now get with the hard forensic evidence. So when you have someone who professes to want to solve this mystery, i.e. the former Governor Abercrombie of Hawaii, who publicly makes a statement that he's going to solve this and get to the bottom of it, and instructs his personnel to go on, an ex-governor of a state calls down to his Department of Health in Hawaii, and he cannot locate this birth certificate that's supposed to be in a bound volume along with 500 other certificates, and he can't find it, that's a problem. And subsequently, through our investigation, we had ascertained two separate occasions, two separate individuals, information. Both of these individuals, at the time in question, were employees of Kapolani Medical Center to one degree or another. Neither of them know each other. However, both relayed the same story to us. The governor asked for Kapolani hospital administrators. The name of the second hospital was Queens, and I believe there was a third whose name still escapes me. But he asked that they search their records for any information regarding the birth event of Barack Obama in their hospitals. After an exhaustive search, these administrators got together and had a report to the governor that no hospital has any record of that birth occurring in Hawaii at that time. Now, this is information we know about. So now you take this and you go back in time. See, work in this case was like working a cold case. You have to go back in time. And sometimes time is your friend in a cold case. Everybody thinks because it's cold and time has gone by that chances of solving something are nil. Time is your friend. And as time wore on, people were more willing to come forward, or they were discussing things that previously they had kept to themselves. And in getting this information, and you go back now in time, and you look at the statements that the governor made, that he could not find it. One of the governor's closest friends, by the name of Mike Evans, went on national radio. There was Radio 33 broadcasts, I believe, on one given day, here in Arizona as well. He made these statements where he claimed that the governor himself told him that there was no birth certificate for Barack Obama in the state of Hawaii. 24 hours later, he goes back out on radio and walks it all that we sent you earlier, Doug, that you could hear this individual who was a Hollywood reporter, nobody who was a stranger to radio. And when you hear the variation that he tells the first time as compared to the variation that he says the second time, you have to start to ask yourself, which one do you believe?
Right. And you know what? Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry. I thought you were
going to say, now you take these statements and you put them together with what the then governor was reporting to the media that he couldn't find it. And now we have that information from hospital administrators telling us it doesn't exist. The fact that the long-form birth certificate was not in the bound volume that it was supposed to be in. The fact that other officials, the director of health, couldn't find it. The state registrar has never publicly said he could find it. When we went to Hawaii under the colors of law enforcement and asked to talk to Alvin Onaka, the state registrar for the Department of Health in Hawaii, he locked himself in his office and refused to come out. He would not talk to us. And we identified ourselves. We're not just the public. We're here because we need to talk to you. And our purpose for going to Hawaii wasn't to find or dig up dirt on Barack Obama or this certificate. Our purpose was laser focused. We were going there to the two entities that could clear this all up, the Department of Health of Hawaii and Kapolani Medical Center. Neither entity would cooperate with us. No.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And they were told. They were told that they were there to clear it up. Sheriff Arpaio went on national media and said, I am trying to clear this president of all of this talk about a fake birth certificate. I want to be the sheriff to clear him. I mean, and so that was the thing. But, you know, I'm sure we're going to listen to these clips in a minute, but what Mike Zullo was talking about with Mike Evans, not only did he walk it back, but I want your listeners to pay very careful attention to when we play these little 1-minute clips, that not only did he walk it back, but he never did say, oh, yeah, we have found the certificate, or no, I misrepresented that. He did have the certificate. They did find. No, what he walked back was, well, I didn't really say that he didn't know, and I didn't mean that, and I said that he told me, but really I read it on Drudge Report, and I mean, it's just unbelievable. So even though he attempted to walk it back, very sad to listen to. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy. Somebody got to him. I mean, it's so obvious. In fact, you can hear the guy's voice shaking. You can hear him umming and ahhing and the whole time he's trying to answer the questions because he knows he's caught. He is caught, and somebody has gotten to him and basically said, you're going to walk this back or else. I don't know what or else, but I mean, it's obvious. So this stuff gets dark and deep.
And we just so you know, we do have the 5 audio segments at the ready. And of course, you're referencing celebrity journalist Mike Evans. And this really kind of made made waves back in, I believe it was January of 2011, and it was reported on by numerous, Fox News, for example, during that time period about how this celebrity journalist just denied everything, did the 180 as you indicated. And you're right. When we listen to these audio clips in studio before the broadcast, there's something definitely underlying here that is suggestive of perhaps somebody getting to him. So indeed. Yeah. Wow. Okay. And it's interesting too, because the law firm that represented the DNC and others over the Russian dossier, just want to say, defended Obama over his long form birth certificate and birth certificate itself. And Donald Trump, of course, I've got all of the Twitter, all of Donald Trump's Twitter messages about Obama in front of me with respect to his birth certificate. Go ahead.
Doug, I'm sorry, this is Carl. Speaking of the law firm, yes. Let me speak to Mike Zullo's integrity. I mean, Mike might have told you the circumstances, but he's not going to say it like I'm going to say it. Perkins Coie is the law firm you're speaking of. One of the document examiners that he went to, he said earlier, out of Hawaii, and an Obama supporter. Help me with the name again, Mike Zullo. Help me. Reed Hayes.
Document examiner, Carl.
Yeah. Mike Zullo went to Reed Hayes because Reed Hayes had done some work for Perkins Coie in the past and was identified as a big Barack Obama supporter. And Mike Zullo, and I don't know his exact words, but I know what he said to Reed Hayes, and he basically said, look, prove me wrong. And Reed Hayes said something along the lines of Mike Zullo is, look, Obama's my man. I'm not going to let anybody pull any trash on him. And Mike Zullo said, well, we're not trying to pull any trash. Would you investigate this? And Reed Hayes said something along the lines of, yes, and if I can clear him, I'm going to clear him. And Mike Zullo said, that's why I'm asking you to do it. I want you to clear him if you can legally. And he says, and Reed Hayes said, well, I'm not going to risk and jeopardize my business. I mean, because Reed Hayes has known all of the United States among law enforcement and various courts, and for his work, he's been been a part of writing 5 books on document examination techniques in law enforcement. And so Reed says, well, I'll tell you the truth. And so Mike Zullo said, that's all we want. And so that's Mike's heart. That's his integrity. He's not out to get this president, never was. And he went to a guy that, that if he didn't have any integrity, he could have come back with some report saying, no, that birth certificate's fine. Of course, Reed Hayes didn't know that Mike Zullo had gone to another agency too, and they were kind of a double blind thing. Sure. But Reed Hayes came back. I mean, a guy that worked for Perkins Coie, he came back and said, oh my gosh. In fact, what was it, Mike? The words he used on the X, I think he said, this is the smoking gun or something like that.
Nail in the coffin. The nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
I've got that exact quote right here. Nail in the coffin, and the his research proves that this was a fraudulently manufactured document.
Yes. So, Mike Zullo, do you want to start playing some of those Mike Evans clips, because this will show the listeners exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Right before we do this, though, Doug, 2 little notes. I want to make sure we go back to Perkins Coie, the law firm, because there's some interesting dynamics involving them. And I want to make sure that we go over the verification in lieu of a certificate issued to the Secretary of State in Hawaii. I believe another one was in Mississippi, if my mind serves me right. And one was also issued in Kansas. And I want to go over those with your audience so they understand why we're not accepting these as a verification of anything.
Sounds good. Okay, I've made note of that, and we do have, again, the 5 audio segments ready, and this, of course, is celebrity journalist Mike Evans about Abercrombie and the certificate of live birth certificate, and the search thereof, and his 180. So you go ahead and tell us where you want to go and how you want to do this.
Well, why don't we just play the first clip and we'll just go down the line.
All right. So, Eric, the tech, that would be number 11, clip 11.
Well, Neil promised me that when he became governor, he was going to cut through all the red tape. He was going to get Obama's birth certificate once and for all and end the stupid controversy that he was not born in the United States. Yesterday, talking to Neil's office, Neil says that he searched everywhere using his power as governor, at the Kapiolani Women's and Children's Hospital and Queens Hospital, the only places kids were born in Hawaii back when Barack was born. No Barack Obama birth certificate in Hawaii.
Really?
Absolutely no proof at all that he was born in Hawaii.
Wow.
Now, he went out. He loves Obama. I mean, he purposely did this to get rid of that question. Now, got some egg in the face. I mean, now he admits publicly that there is no birth certificate.
Well, and Mike, the addendum to that is there's this story of there was a birth announcement, but it's been explained his grandparents could have called the newspaper and said, hey, our grandchild was born. And he didn't have to be born in Hawaii for that. So it's raising the issue again.
Absolutely.
After it seemed to be put to bed.
And I asked him, I go, well, do you...
All right, I think that concludes
I
that.
asked him. Don't forget, I asked him. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Okay, so what you've got there is you've got this radio interview that I believe was out of Minneapolis when it occurred. And he is out there, and he is emphatic,
yes,
that he got direct information from the governor himself. They couldn't find a birth certificate, that he could not locate one. And he goes into this big explanation on how he reached out and how he spoke to him, and Neil told him. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it's in any of these clips, but he identifies Neil Abercrombie, a close friend of his, as an Obama lover, that he was fanatic.
I think that's in the second clip, number 22, I think. Yes.
Okay. So you have to understand, this is the guy's mindset at the time. He is out there kind of wearing that big badge on his chest. I know the governor, and I spoke to him personally. Yeah. We just play the next one.
All right. And by the way, that was from KQRS out of Minneapolis, I believe it was, on the morning of January 20th of 2011. This, according to the notes I've got from FoxNews.com. And Eric, play clip 22.
Well, and what's interesting about it is this guy attacked people who questioned that he was born in Hawaii just a few weeks ago.
Neil did.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, Neil and I are buddies, and during this whole inauguration, when I was in Washington for those 10 days, spent a lot of time with Neil, and anytime anybody come up and bring this up, you're right, Neil was almost militant about it. I remember him as a kid. He was from Hawaii, born and raised in Hawaii. So, needless to say, I think he was probably shocked more than anybody with the whole thing.
I mean, don't you have to produce papers that say, in fact, you were born in the United States?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
You'd have to.
Well, there's been a certificate of live birth, but that's being questioned too because you don't have birth certificate.
There has to be one at the hospital signed by the doctor verifying birth and a birth, but there isn't that. It's like a baptism papers. It's not worth the paper it's written on, really.
Well, Mike, how hard would it be to go back and find out what doctors were on then?
Well, apparently he can't find any of that, and it said that they were there.
And guys, please hear Mike Evans represent. He doesn't call him Governor Abercrombie. He calls him Neil. Neil. You know, Neil and I, we were in Washington, D.C. Neil and I were at the inauguration. Neil, I called his office, and he said, and Neil told me that he was going to get to the bottom of it. I mean, that don't forget that. When we get to the denial part, when you play that clip, don't forget all of the context there. His emphatic declarations of what Neil, his best buddy, who he was in Washington, D.C. with at the inauguration of Obama, Neil told him. Then listen to this denial, listen to his voice, and your audience can make up their own minds.
All right.
Now, I listened to the KQRS morning show, and I listened to you and those hosts, and you shared a controversy, or this controversy rather, in a conversation that you had with the governor. Is that an accurate statement?
No, it isn't. If you listen to it, I just listened to it again. I said I talked to Neil's office. I didn't say that I talked to Neil. And I said, but the one thing that did come out is that there was no birth certificate at Kapiolani Women's and Children's Hospital or at the Queens Medical Center. And I said that's where it would come from. And I was actually calling to see what Neil had to say about that. But I was never able to get hold of the governor.
Michael, who was your source? Who told you that?
I read it last week, and it was on the Drudge Report.
I mean, but did anyone in the who was it in the governor's office that said there is no birth certificate?
I read it, and I believe it was the New York Daily News that said that their report there was no birth certificate at the Queens Medical Center or the Kapiolani Women's and Children's Hospital.
All right.
Notice he didn't answer the question. Well, who'd you talk to at the governor's office?
Very, very.
He completely evades any connection to him and Abercrombie at that point. At that point, Abercrombie is out of the picture. Now he wants you to believe, well, he didn't talk to him directly, and like Carl pointed out, he talked to somebody in the governor's office, and he still maintains that's where he got information from, was from the governor's office. So when you take these two statements and you compare them together, what's the one undeniable conclusion? They couldn't find a birth certificate.
Couldn't find it. That's right.
Doesn't matter anything else he says at that point, they can't find it. No matter what individual he went to, no one could tell them they had it in their possession. And that becomes a big problem down the road, especially when it comes to the releasing of this PDF file that is the only, quote, document, unquote, that the public has ever seen. And that PDF file has no probative value. It has no legal significance. It is not a birth certificate. It is not a document issued by the Department of Health in Hawaii. Statutes do not permit that, and you couldn't use it to get a dog license. Yet that is the only thing the public has seen. And then what do? They take that document and they sequester it where no one could ever see it again. And after we go through this, we'll talk about the only journalist permitted to see that document was Savannah Guthrie, who takes a photo of it with her 4-megapixel iPhone at the time in a dark room on a table, and there's problems with that when you compare the photograph of the document she took to what the rendering is of the PDF file. So it becomes even more problematic. So let's just finish these clips out, and we'll get into that in a second.
All right.
And I listened to you and those hosts, and you shared a controversy, or this controversy rather, in a conversation that you had with the governor. Is that an accurate statement?
No, it isn't. If you listen to it, I just listened to it again. I said I talked to Neil's office. I didn't say that I talked to Neil.
Michael, who was your source? Who told you that?
I read it last week, and it was on the Drudge Report.
Okay, now let's go back to Mike Evans' original interview and listen to what he actually said.
Well, Neil promised me that when he became governor, he was going to cut through all the red tape. He was going to get Obama's birth certificate once and for all and end the stupid controversy that he was not born in the United States. Yesterday, talking to Neil's office, Neil says that he searched everywhere using his power as governor at the Kapiolani Women's and Children's Hospital and Queens Hospital, the only places kids were born in Hawaii back when Barack was born. There is no Barack Obama birth certificate in Hawaii.
And one more time, here's what Mike Evans' response was when he was challenged on another radio program.
Michael, who was your source? Who told you that?
I read it last week, and it was on the Drudge Report.
That's amazing. That
So,
flip-flopping.
You know, it's pretty evident at that point in time that he is trying to cover up for something that he said the day before, had not formulated this completely in his thought process. And when he's challenged on a question, now he wants to tell you, well, I read it on the Drudge Report. Well, how does that compare to, I spoke to the governor, I called his office, and now I read it?
And you think if, and just this observation, if he was blowing hot air, if he was lying in his initial comments, there would be no reason for him to back off that lie because he wasn't being pressed on it or called out on it. So what would be the other reason to change his story? And if it's not because he was lying or caught in a lie, then that you have to look at the intimidation angle or being backed off of his talking points.
Please remember, these clips we're playing, they're pretty fantastical. but the bottom line is these clips, you can't convict anybody with these clips. Like Mike said, these are circumstantial pieces of evidence, but they're huge because everything we're playing on these clips, all of these years later, is still fact. No one has seen a birth certificate. And you've got a governor who ran on the promise that he would produce the birth certificate to the world. He would bring it out and produce it, who not only could not, but did not, and then lost the election, I think probably kind of sort of because of that. And then you've got this Hollywood reporter who he's not a nobody. He's on syndicated radio all the time. He's claiming that he's big buddies with Neil. We were in Washington with Neil. We were at the inauguration with Neil. And Neil told me this, and Neil assured me this. And I called the office, and Neil said. And so you got that guy saying that the governor said there is no birth certificate. And to this day, and Mike can tell you the details, Kapiolani in Queens Neither one of them will come anywhere near close to saying, oh, yeah, he was born here. Where's the monument to Obama's birth, America's first black president? No monument. There's not even a plaque on the wall anywhere in any state DOH, Department of Health, in any hospital. America's first black president, a Nobel Prize-winning president, Peace Prize-winning president, and nobody will claim his birth all of these years later. See, that's why we're playing these clips. These clips, you can't walk it into a court and say, okay, here's the evidence, therefore Barack Obama has no birth certificate. No, that's not the purpose of these clips. The purpose of the clips is to show that important people knew there was no birth certificate. They were talking about it, accidentally or otherwise, and all of these years later, still is no birth certificate. I mean, and there's just so much more of this kind of circumstantial evidence that leads the investigation to other places of forensically proven hard evidence that you do take to court. But all of this is important.
Indeed, it is. We've got. I just want to give you guys a heads up here. We've got 4 minutes to the hard break at the top of the hour, and one more clip if you want to dispense with the final clip, or if you want to wait on that. It's up to you.
Well, let me address something that was said. I think it was Joe who raised the question. Why would he deviate from this? I think you have to look at it like this. That was a pretty declarative statement that Evans made. He is saying that I had direct contact with the governor who told me there is no birth certificate. Now, Abercrombie never came out and said there is no birth certificate.
Right.
He said we can't find it.
Right.
And the problem for them was having the governor relay to someone close to him that it doesn't exist was problematic. And Abercrombie is no stranger to fictitious documents. There was a fundraising letter circulated by Capilani Medical Center right after Barack Obama became president, purportedly, and this is even suspect itself. He sends a letter on White House stationery congratulating Capilani for their anniversary and their fundraising event, and he calls it the place of his birth, the Capilani Medical Center, purportedly in this document. That document is then circulated in flyers while Capilani is fundraising. It was through WND that they began to question the validity of the document because their reporters noticed anomalies in the document that suggested that this was a cut and paste type of effort. And after going around weeks and months with Capilani to try to get to the truth, ultimately under threat of a federal investigation into fundraising fraud, did Capilani come clean and say that that was not the original document that they had put in their flyer, that it was something that they, in fact, pieced together. Now, this is taking pieces of the president's signature, inserting different verbiage into a document, and circulating it around. And who's at the nexus of that was Abercrombie. Because Abercrombie was the person who read this purported letter at a fundraising event. And when they compared the information in the original letter, it differs from what Abercrombie read. So these people are no strangers to cut and paste and making phony documents. So he's got that issue. On top of that, Abercrombie was also someone who was reported in the media as saying that he was present when Obama was born and got jammed up and had to walk that back. And then he said, well, I remember him playing softball or stickball or something like this. And there's a problem with that because he would have been around 4 or 5 years old. And at 5 years old, he was off in Indonesia.
We are talking
in Hawaii.
We're talking with Carl Gallups and Mike Zullo. Guys, we're right up against the break, and we are 1 hour in. We have 1 hour left. We're going to continue to break this down on the other side with both of our guests on this Friday edition of the HAGMANN Report. So stay tuned. We will be right back after this quick break. Don't go anywhere.
This Friday edition of the HAGMANN Report, our special guest, Carl Gallups, carlgallups.com, and investigator Mike Zullo from the Cold Case Posse. There, I got audio back in my headset. Thank you. It's perfect, Eric. We made some changes, folks, in terms of audio and cabling here at the studio, which is why we are actually audio only on YouTube tonight. But no matter, the subject matter is critical. It's important. And I want to point out that investigator Mike Zullo spent, and Joe Arpaio had said this specifically. Mike Zullo dedicated 5 years of his life to this investigation. 5 years. And to me, that's so important. And of course, Carl Gallups being a part of this as well. And the importance cannot be understated, especially against the backdrop of the news that we're seeing today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Carl Gallups. Carl, if you don't mind, if you want to just superintend this presentation, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, and again, not trying to be falsely humble, but and thank you for your kind introduction. But let me just say, the blood, sweat, and tears in this thing is in the lap of Mike Zullo. I mean, yeah, I was indirectly a part. They graciously allowed me to be a part. I did some a lot of media representation of it. Sheriff Arpaio did deputize me as a special deputy. That was to hold me accountable for what I said, and it was to hold them accountable for what they were telling me. And but I didn't have arrest powers. I didn't actually conduct the investigation. I did help Mike where he asked me, and he would bounce a few things off of me, et cetera. But man, you're right. 5 years, blood, sweat, and tears. Some of that blood is still dripping. Some of the sweat and tears are still dripping. And but this thing is not over, guys. And we can talk about this later. And I don't know how much Mike will want to talk about it, but I can talk about it for hours. I believe with all of my heart that what we're watching in the headline news, the foundational platform of it all, is this birth certificate. And if you want to, guys, I mean, I can lay out the scenario. Just from my past many years of law enforcement, connecting together the circumstantial evidence along with the hardcore forensic evidence. I'm not claiming to have any inside knowledge. This would just be my forensic opinions. But I'm convinced, and I can tell you, even Sheriff Arpaio is convinced and has said publicly that the sham of a federal trial that he was saddled with, that President Trump came along later and pardoned him from, he was convinced that whole thing was about the fact that he dared to investigate this birth certificate. And please remember, guys, there is no state in this union that officially recognizes in writing, with a plaque, with a statute. There is no hospital anywhere in these United States of America that officially recognizes with a plaque, with a statue, with a declaration, with an affidavit, that Barack Obama was born there. There are none. Nobody has handled a paper document with a raised seal backed up by microfilm. Now, you think of it, guys. If your identity was called into question in a very serious nature and you had to clear yourself, would you spend millions of dollars on obfuscation and marginalizing and calling people tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorists? Or would you just spend $15 and 20 minutes of your time and go produce the birth certificate? I mean, here we are all of these years later, and nobody has handled it, including a Hawaii governor who tried to handle it. So that's where we are.
Stated. Yeah,
it's very telling.
Yep, exactly. All right. Mike, hey, go ahead.
All right. Why don't we dispense with the last clip, because I think people get the idea and we're running out of time here.
Okay.
Let me just fast forward a little bit from Mike Evans, and eventually Abercrombie comes out publicly and says that they discovered a document in the archives in Hawaii that would represent Obama's birth. And he described it as half-typed. Now, if you look at that PDF file, that's not half-typed and half-written. That is a document that comes out of a hospital. Those birth certificates are typed out at the hospital. Then they are picked up by courier, taken to the Department of Health in Hawaii, where they are inspected for accuracy, given a serial number, and then dates of acceptance are stamped on the lower left and lower right-hand corners of those documents. Well, I haven't shared this before. Carl knows about it. We are in possession of a Hawaii birth certificate. My memory serves, it's a year before Obama's. Obama's was 1961. I believe this document was created in 1960. It is a half-typed, half-written birth certificate. However, when it was issued, and now you have to understand Hawaii law. Hawaii law says anybody could walk in and report a birth, and under their statute, the Department of Health must issue a certificate. Must. There's no discretion. This document, half-typed, half-written, does not have the child's name typed on the document as if it was in a hospital. As a matter of fact, it is handwritten in. Other information is handwritten in. And right on the front of this document, there's a line underneath those date stamps that I just described to you, accepting of the document. There is another field that asks for an explanation of any alteration that happened to that certificate. And right in that box, it says that in 1964, now mind you, this happened, I believe, in 1960 was the date of birth. 1964, the name was added to the certificate. Now, you got to take that back and understand what that is. The acceptance dates on this 1960 birth certificate accepted by the registrar's office as being valid didn't occur to 1968. So that tells you that half-typed, half-written documents were not complete. They were missing key information. Therefore, they couldn't be filed properly. Now, is that to say that's what Obama has? I don't know, because that document that Abercrombie referred to has never seen the light of day. But here's the issue. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say for some unknown reason there was missing information on his documentation. And the document we have in our possession shows the mother who gave birth to this individual was of the age of 14. There was father's name was missing. There's other information missing on that document. Let's say that some event like that took place. He still doesn't have a long form in that bound volume. Nobody can find it. That means what you see in that PDF file, specifically where it says the birthplace was Kapolani Medical Center, and they can't find her certificate, it didn't happen there. There's no way for Kapolani to be on that certificate because those are typed out at the time of birth by the hospital. Only way you could have anything resembling that document would have been under their law permits for amending a birth certificate with information at any time after the event by simply nothing more than an affidavit and information that the Department of Health deems creditable. And they have no investigatory capability. So they're going to subjectively decide what's good and what isn't. Well, if that's the case, what that allows to happen is the original document, under giving him the benefit of the doubt, half-typed, half-written, is now sealed away in a separate file, and the newly created document with the updated information becomes, quote, the original birth record. But in fact, it is not the original birth record. It's been amended. But under Hawaii law, you don't look at the first document anymore. It's sealed and has to be retained somewhere else and can only be opened through court order. Again, Kapolani couldn't be the place of birth. Taking an affidavit for someone, that's pretty thin. You don't investigate it. Then you go down to the August acceptance dates, August 8th, 1961. Well, if it was an incomplete document, half-typed, half-written, it can't have those acceptance dates because if it had the acceptance dates, it would have been in the bound volume, like every other birth certificate. So there is a major problem here. Major problem. Going forward now to 2011, when he released his long-form birth certificate, there was a press gaggle that took place an hour before. Presented the Democratic National Committee in legal challenges regarding this birth document. White House counsel at the time of the release of this certificate was the guy by the name of Robert Bauer. Robert Bauer was an attorney for Perkins Coie before he went over to become White House counsel. He was Obama's personal attorney. We have documentation of him writing letters regarding eligibility issues representing the Democratic Party, counsel of record. He now moves over, becomes White House counsel. Robert Bauer and Dan Pfeiffer hold a press conference, press gaggle, before the issuance of the PDF file and the subsequent comments made by Obama. And this thing is amazing. They go through this big rendition that they had to do this big legal analysis to determine if they could even get him a certificate. Well, under Hawaii state law, he has every right to his certificate. He's the person on it. He has every right to get a copy. There should be no big deal here. But he makes it sound like they had to jump all through these hoops. Well, I don't believe that for a minute. I think that was actually a Freudian slip because they had to massage statutes to see if they could create a new birth certificate. That's what I believe. That's speculation on my part, but that's what I believe.
Wow.
During this press gaggle, if you notice, you never see the long-form birth certificate. You never see anyone holding it. You never see the President of the United States holding his own birth certificate when he makes the announcement. And in the Q&A going back and forth, a reporter asks a question. He says, "You've got 2 certified copies according to this study." Now, I don't know what study he's referring to. Must mean according to their handouts. Every news agency in that press gaggle received photocopies of something that looks like the birth certificate that you see in the PDF file, absent of the green safety paper background, which is suspect to me. I don't know how they did that, unless they put it through Photoshop. But he says, you have these physical, and it stops. Stops right there. Mr. Pfeiffer answers, "Yes, I showed you one, just one." And the reporter says, "You showed us a photocopy of one." Pfeiffer responds, "I showed you," stops. Question from the reporter, "Does that have a stamp?" Pfeiffer replies, "It has a seal on it." Now, there are no photographs of that document. There are no photographs, with the exception of Savannah Guthrie taking a photograph at a later point in time with her cell phone. Now, think about this. This is Savannah Guthrie. There is the AP is in there. There are photographers all over the place. Doug, I'm going to tell you, there were more flash cubes going off when we did the first press conference, and I picked up the blow-up of the Obama certificate in my hand. There was an array of flashes going on around me. You don't see anything like that at that press gag. Then the reporters begin to ask him if the president is going to hold the document when he makes his announcement. And the answer to that question, no, he's not, and it's not going to be in here for him to do so. Why not? Why don't you want the President of the United States to hold up his own birth certificate so he takes no possession of it? And the reason for that, you know as well as I do, it's plausible deniability. They sent, according to the testimony, not testimony, to the transcript of that press gaggle, Robert Bauer says that they sent Judith Corley, the president's new personal attorney from Perkins Coie, to Hawaii on an overnight trip to pick up 2 certified copies of his birth certificate. Perkins Coie is going over there, picking them up on a turnaround to Hawaii, brings them back, goes through all of that, and nobody displays the actual certificate. You got to start to ask yourself why. What are they concerned about? Why isn't the President of the United States allowed to hold his own birth certificate? Perkins Coie, Robert Bauer, when Robert Bauer left, he went back to Perkins and now heads up all their political motivated agendas for that law firm, including the situation with Fusion GPS, through Fusion GPS.
And there it is. Yep. And if I can just add this, I don't mean to interrupt, but Corley, Judith Corley was working as an attorney in the office of the White House counsel, responsible for representing Obama in personal matters as well. And Robert Bauer, of course, married to Anita Dunn. I just wanted to what an incestuous. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt there, sir.
No, that's a great point. I actually forgot to mention all that, so I'm glad you did. It gives a new meaning to the president's term, S-hole. I mean, how bad does this get? I mean, there's just nothing but this den of vipers out there that will do anything and say anything in order to conceal the truth about this document. So obviously there was something with this document that they don't want the public to see and or know about. Even if they wanted to release the half-typed, half-written version, it would have had problems. If they wanted to release it after they amended it by Hawaii law, it has to be stamped clearly that it is amended and has no probative value. It can no longer be relied on. So then you have a bunch of these challenges go on through courts about eligibility and about the long-form birth certificate. And this is the thing that really amazed me in my research on this. Hawaii statutes make it very clear who has a right to see a document and who doesn't. And they have to determine that you are a person that has a direct, tangible interest in that vital statistics record. And that would be the registrant, who's the person who the birth certificate was issued to, the spouse, the parents, descendants, all kinds of things like that. But there's one item in there, item number 9, that says a person whose right to inspect, or a lot of these challenges, some of them took place in federal court. Federal court. No one petitioned a judge for an order to have Hawaii produce the verified long-form copy, hard copy of that birth certificate. And that's also including representatives of the Mississippi Democratic Party in a lawsuit that was instituted by Orly Tates over this very issue, in lieu of a certificate. So they're not producing that certificate. For some reason, nobody wants to produce it. The Secretary of State in Arizona, this law firm representing the Mississippi Democratic Party got one as well. And there's a third one out there. I believe, I can't remember exactly where it was issued, but I know for a fact that it was nothing more than the same wording used by our Secretary of State in Arizona to get it. Kansas got it. And let me just read these verifications. What to Hawaii Revised Statute 33-14.3. I verify the following. And it goes down, the birth certificate is on file. The name of the person is. Department of Health file numbers, time of birth, name of hospital, father's age, whatever information was requested, that's what was given to them. And then it says this right before it has the seal of Alvin Onaka, the state registrar, confirming the information. In the Arizona situation, it says, additionally, I verify that the information in the copy of the certificate of live birth for Mr. Obama, not verifying the copy of the document as being a certificate of live birth. It's only verifying that the information contained is what's in their files. Now, when you get to the Mississippi case, those lawyers got a little smarter. Let me just back up 1 second. The the Arizona verification has Alvin Onaka's certification. It says, I certify that the information contained in this vital record on file with the Department of Health was used to verify the facts of this vital event. Now, keep in mind what I told you. You could amend these things where the newly placed information now becomes the facts of the vital event, and the other information is sealed away out of everyone's sight. It's got a stamp on it with his signature, PhD, Alvin T. Onaka, but it has initials to it. It looks like a JK or a GK next to it. That's an indication Alvin Onaka did not stamp that. Someone else stamped it on his behalf. When you get to the Mississippi verification, this was clever. This is how they have it worded. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statutes 3, the original certificate of live birth for Barack Hussein Obama II is on file with the State of Hawaii Department of Health. Number 2, the information contained in the certificate of live birth, now understand what he's saying, published at www.whitehouse.gov and reviewed by me on the date of this verification, a copy of which is attached with your request, matches the information contained in the original certificate of live birth for Barack Hussein Obama II, only saying that they're verifying information contained. They're not verifying that, yes. They're not saying it's something they issued. They're not saying that document even looks like that. They are just verifying information. And again, that information from a 1961 date birth event could have been put in that file in 2008, 9, 10, or 11. Anytime. It could be put on in the future with another amendment.
Hey, Mike. No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, you keep going. I thought you were finished. But tell the audience, because the point you're raising now is tremendously important. Tell the audience the case in New Jersey, for example, how that can be put on file and then presented by an unknowing clerk, and it looked like it's absolutely authentic, because maybe you were already going there. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
No, that's okay. And I just want to point out on this Mississippi verification, this time the initials of Alvin T. Onaka are next to his name. So this was really wordsmithed in such a way to give this illusion that the certificate is real. However, at any time, someone could have petitioned the judge in front of this case to put out an order to produce the real document, and no one pursued it. This attorney could have pursued it, because under Hawaii law, he has every right to ask for this. Hawaii law gives an attorney in a legal case the right to get a certified copy of a birth certificate, and no one got it. Now, Hawaii didn't offer it up, and obviously no one either naively or purposely did not ask for it. As far as information, what Carl was talking about, there are a couple cases, but one in particular in New Jersey, which was brought to my attention, and I took special interest in because I was a cop in New Jersey. There was a Department of Health director who was receiving money for the service of implanting false identity documents, i.e. birth information, into files in the Department of Health Vital Statistics Office. I think it was in Jersey City, if I remember right, fraudulently creating those documents. In doing so, here's what would happen. The illegal alien who is going in now to get the fraudulent document presents some form of ID, most likely fraudulent, to an unsuspecting clerk. The unsuspecting clerk goes, retrieves that file information. Everything appears to be in order. And like any good clerk, does their job and issues a certificate. All the while, it's fraudulent. And all the information contained in it is fraudulent. Here's our problem with the half-typed, half-written statement that Abercrombie made. No one has seen that document. No one could attest to that document's authenticity. It was out of the normal protocol chain of custody that a birth certificate would have at the Department of Health. So much so that Hawaii law even allows their microfilm records to be viewed by anyone doing genealogical research, provided the documentation they're seeking is 75 years or older at the time. That means Hawaii knows how to open up the door to the microfilm vault and take a look at some microfilm. You would think the governor would have had someone go in and look at the microfilm. You would think that Alvin Onaka would have been smart enough. He's a PH. Go unlock the vault door to the microfilm rolls and let's see if we can find this guy's birth certificate. I bet you that happened, and I bet they couldn't find it. But the big problem you have here is no one knows if the information in the half-typed, half-written document was actually created in 1960 or conveniently created in 2010 or 11 and put in a file box somewhere for someone to find, or no one ever found it. This is just a story. So this thing is plagued with problems. And the reason why you can't just put something like this to bed is, like Carl said in the very beginning, my personal belief, foundational lie to the presidency of the United States. And if you look at where the shape this country is in before this last election, we are at each other's throats. People are hating each other. The economy was in the garbage. Open borders was going to be the main event. The destruction of the United States of America was well on its way. And I believe that putting this individual in that position, he acted as nothing more than a gatekeeper for a big, liberal, communistic agenda, proving that that was a fraudulent presidency. In addition to that, during the course of this investigation, we came in contact with a CIA operative. His name was Dennis Montgomery. Now, his reputation has been trashed by the government, but for good reason, because they didn't want him to ever talk about what he was doing. Montgomery is the guy who developed the computer hacking software that you're reading about now that we knew about 4 years ago from him, that hacks into, he developed a computer system called the Hammer, which was built in Fort Washington, Virginia. He made its record, that breaches computer systems around the globe and could penetrate any computer firewall, get in, take over as the administrator, and he can do whatever he wants in there, download, upload, change anything. During our time with him, he alerted me to the fact that there were IP address trails, and yeah, I'm working from memory here, so bear with me. I believe going back to 2007 or 8, right up until about 3 months before the document, the PDF file, was ever released. These IP address trails show their places of origin from Washington and or Virginia area that breached the vital statistics servers held at the Department of Health in Hawaii at Hawaii University. Breached them on numerous occasions. Information was taken from those computers and then forwarded to a server in Jakarta, Indonesia, and then subsequently routed back to Washington. The server in Indonesia was identified by Mr. Montgomery as being operated by the CIA, and other information does prove that it was a government-used server. As far as the three-letter agency involved, that I cannot determine, obviously. But it's no coincidence. There's really no reason for the U.S. government to be worried about Hawaii's birth records and sending it to a government server in Indonesia and then back again, and utilizing the very equipment that Montgomery constructed. This also led me to track down, because of the investigation, the subsequent investigation that was opened on identity theft brought to us by Montgomery, where 4 years ago he was alleging, and now it's proving out to be true, that the federal government was illegally obtaining personal information on millions and millions of Americans, including 151,000 residents of Maricopa County, which was proved out. That information, along with other things that you're seeing here, and unfolding before your eyes now. The same players that are involved with Fusion GPS in the Obama administration are the same players that were involved with the government at the time of this birth certificate. And that, again, led me to track down people that were NSA employees that constructed, developed, utilized the hacking software. Now, there's two different things. There's one thing to penetrate a firewall. There's another thing to hack in and retrieve the information. And they developed this software program called ThinThread that was able to go in and retrieve ungodly amounts of computer digital information through fiber optic junction boxes located way beneath the ocean, computer systems, and mass collecting data. Now, what these three individuals did, though, is they put an encryption protection on that information. Ultimately, their work product was taken, and parts of it were doled out to another program called Trailblazer. Trailblazer was developed by the NSA, only it was absent of any of the Fourth Amendment protection devices that ThinThread had. In other words, it was naked mass harvesting. Program developed by the three NSA guys who ultimately became whistleblowers, gave up their careers, and lives were ruined for doing it, had an encryption program in it, whereas they can get, just for an example, they got your cell phone information. If you as law enforcement wanted that information, you would have to petition a FISA court judge who would then give them an order to decrypt just that information. If there was other information now developed, other phone calls that you wanted to look at, you had to go back to the FISA court, get another court order, and they would just unencrypt that information. That was ThinThread. These guys got pissed off when they took ThinThread, turned it into what was called Trailblazer, and removed that apparatus out of their software. And now it was a vagrant collection of information, unprotected, just out there, random information just being seized. What Montgomery also told us was they got so sophisticated with it that they didn't have to just do random harvesting, they could target you. And the way they camouflaged this was to target you and collect everything else around you, so it looked like it was a mass harvesting program with no end target all along. We also got information from him about wiretaps, legal wiretaps, which we took this information to a federal judge. Sheriff Arpaio, it was determined by Montgomery, was illegally wiretapped. This guy had phone numbers of people that I didn't have, and were verified through that office. We took all this information to a federal judge, and as fate would have it, eventually it ended up going to the FBI. It went to the FBI that were achieved for Dennis Montgomery by Larry Klayman. I put Larry Klayman and Dennis Montgomery together because he was going to need legal representation for this. He went for 4 or 6 hours, I believe it was, and he was interviewed by the FBI, and he produced not only all that information, he produced the birth certificate information as well. Now, he produced it to an individual by the name of James Baker, who should sound familiar to you, because he's in the hot seat now with the FBI as being their legal representative, and he's got some issues, who he reported directly to. And for 2.5 years, now going on 3 years, the FBI has sat on this information. So much so that Larry Klayman filed a lawsuit trying to find out what did they do with it and what are they going to do. They've never acted on it. But when you're seeing this stuff unfold before your eyes, this was stuff we knew was going on years ago. Try to get somebody to listen to you. They think you're crazy. I tell you the ridicule I've gone through, even from my own agency, thinking I was out of my mind. And now it's all coming out. So you have this certificate with all these problems that it should take a trained FBI investigator a week to solve, and nobody wants to look at it. Nobody would look at it. FBI wouldn't take any calls on it. There was no place we could turn to bring it. We couldn't go to the DOJ. Loretta Lynch was running the DOJ. We couldn't go to the FBI. Couldn't go to the CIA. Where do you go? So we take it to a federal judge. It's still the FBI. And there is so much more. We just don't have time. This document, my opinion, was the opening of a gate to allow the fundamental transformation of America to occur. If you remember what Obama said in the beginning, that's what he pledged was coming. And he's got a guy, we have a guy here, every identity document has a problem. His birth certificate has a problem. His elective service card has a problem. His life narrative has a problem. His girlfriends in his own memoir are now called composites. I don't know what a composite girlfriend is, but he's got them. He's got them. I don't know what that is. They're composites. Everything about him is plagued with a problem.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can I speak a little bit now, giving my assessment opinion, but it's learned and it's based upon contextual forensic information, but it is only my opinion as to how everything with the birth certificate ties in directly to what happened in the headline news today, for example. Can I do that?
Sure.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, if there's something else more important you need to ask, please do. I'm not trying to hog it. It's just that, I'm pretty passionate about this. Think of this, guys. Think of this. We go all the way back to Barack Obama coming in office. Before he even went in office, I remember I was on the air as a radio host, and actually I was a co-host of a show back then in 2007, and somebody came on and said, yeah, this guy running for president, Barack Obama, he doesn't even have a birth certificate. He's not even from here. I was nice to the guy, but I was very skeptical. And I was so naive back then to say something like, well, no, they wouldn't let that happen. Who's they? The DNC, the RNC, the federal government, the Supreme Court, Congress. I don't know. I just had enough faith in America that they wouldn't let some person that didn't have proper identification be the commander-in-chief of the number one superpower of military in the world. And so I said, I doubt that. I really think you're off base there. Well, anyway, let me just speed up. As time went on, it became very apparent that something was just smelling. And so Obama goes in office, and this thing is still dogging him. So up comes the little short form. And I think there were two short forms, weren't there, Mike? I mean, the first one had some problems, then another one showed up, something like that?
Yeah, the first one was actually a forgery, and it was admitted to.
Yeah. I mean, how does that happen? And with a president, I mean, I could see how that would happen with a taxi driver or something. Nothing disparaging against taxi drivers. I'm just saying. I mean, I could see how that would happen. But the president?
Carl, if I could make one other point on that.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
That fraudulent short form registration number. How does a forger get that?
Yeah, I know. This is such a convoluted mess. But anyway, follow me, guys. So we're watching this unfold, and then that debate goes on for the longest, for almost 2 years, and along comes this guy named Donald Trump. He's not even announcing that he's running for president back then. He might have hinted around to people, but there's been no formal announcement. But he's got some inside scoop. He's a billionaire. He's got his own investigators. He knows people like Sheriff Arpaio. He lives in Arizona. And he sees this debacle going on, and he loves our country back in 2010. He's concerned, so he uses his bully pulpit to challenge Obama. Look, get rid of all these short-form junk pieces and put if you're from here, if you've got a birth certificate, put it up there. Everybody else would. You're the president. Good gosh, man. What's wrong with you? I mean, he just shamed him and shamed him and shamed him. And that was about the time that Jerome Corsi was getting ready to release his book, Where's the Birth Certificate, and all of his investigation. So in the meantime, the long form goes up, and that's when all of this investigation ensued through Maricopa County, Sheriff Joe Arpaio. He was petitioned by a bunch of his we might have been defrauded in our election. You're the sheriff. You need, what if this guy's birth certificate is fraudulent? What if it's fake ID? Please investigate this. So Sheriff Arpaio gets a hold of Mike Zullo, his chief investigator of the cold case posse back then, says, look, I want to be the one to clear this guy. Please do this. Let's check this out. Mike Zullo doesn't know anything about anything back then as far as the birth certificate went. He didn't pay attention to that. He didn't care. He was just a lawman, a cop, an investigator. He walks in, he tells the sheriff, yes, sir, I'll do my best to clear it. And so he looks at it, and cold case posse, they do their investigation, and he goes to the sheriff and says, Sheriff, I got bad news for you. This thing stinks to high heaven. And the sheriff said, oh, my gosh. And he said, are you sure we can't get this cleared? And Mike Zullo said, Sheriff, we cannot clear this document. It's got too many problems. Well, anyway, so subsequently, 2 press conferences were held showing all the evidence they had. The media, what'd they do? They challenged Arpaio's authority to investigate it. They didn't even look at the evidence. They didn't talk about the evidence. It was like, well, what authority do you have to do this? Well, can you imagine if Donald Trump, if it was legitimately accused that he was absolutely using fake documentation for all of his identifying documents, and the media showed up and said to the investigators of that crime, what authority do you have to do that? We don't want to talk about the evidence you've collected. We want to talk about what authority you have. I mean, that's surreal. It was surreal. When Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio knew, oh, my gosh, we've got a national obfuscation going on coming right out of the White House, and the media is involved. And so anyway, we know the rest of the story. It starts going forward, and then 5 years of all of these investigations ensue. The next thing you know, it's getting closer and closer, and along comes another sheriff's office election, another sheriff's election coming up. But right prior to that, you've got all these suits being filed or cases being filed against Arpaio, and he's disobeying federal orders and all these allegations. He's dragged into a federal court, and shortly before an election, and then finally a federal judge determines that he is guilty of a misdemeanor contempt of court charge. So now they've got a, quote, criminal charge against him right before and right during his election. And then we find out that George Soros comes in to Maricopa County, pumps millions of dollars against Arpaio into Arpaio's opponent, and conducts this big multi-million-dollar campaign against Arpaio. And in the meantime, he's been dragged into federal court and accused of or charged with contempt of court, misdemeanor, fine, and or a small jail sentence. So they're thinking, watch me now, because I'm going to bring it up in today's headlines. Here's what I believe the plan was. This birth certificate is an absolute fraud. Mike Zullo knows that. Sheriff Arpaio knows that. I know that. 2 digital document international entities know that and have signed affidavits to it. Other witnesses know that. We know this. It is an absolute ground-up fabrication. It's a fraudulent document. Guys, there are at least 5 crimes involved with that. Doug, you know this. Number 1, if you create a false document for ID, that's a felony. Number 2, if you possess false ID, that's a felony. Number 3, if you use it to identify yourself, that's a felony. Number 4, if you post it on a government website as your identification, that's a felony. Number 5, if you use that ID to command the U.S. military, that's high treason, maybe. So the point is, crime after crime after crime are potentially associated with this document, and the deep state knows it. So Congress won't touch it. The media won't even address the facts. They won't even address the forensic analysis. They've never, no media source has ever come forward, no major media has ever come forward and said, here's the forensic analysis. Here's what they found out. Look at this video. Look at these documents. Here are the affidavits of the 2 companies. Nobody's ever done that. And then, of course, you've got the FBI sitting on this information. We're all scratching our heads. Why are they sitting on it? Now we find out that James Comey's a part of the deep state and was all along. He was in the tank for Hillary. Well, why is that important? Because watch, guys, Hillary Clinton was sure she was going to win the presidency. Now we've got these texts coming out of the FBI from a high-ranking official and his mistress. They're saying, you know, we got this Trump dossier. We got to keep him out, but there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. And then they're saying, the secret society has met, and we've got to have an insurance policy, and we've got to have a plan B. What's all of this about? It's about Donald Trump winning the president. Want him to win the presidency when just a few years prior he was the hero of America, because he's the one that started the whole birth certificate thing. And if he wins the presidency, he will be the executive officer who can make this happen. He can put judges on benches. He can put Supreme Court justices in. He can put a new cabinet in. He can appoint new FBI directors and CIA directors. He can appoint a new DOJ head, and on and on. They were thinking, oh, my gosh, we can't let this man win. And who's Donald Trump? He's a businessman. He's not a politician. He beat the Clinton machine. He beat the Obama machine. He beat the DNC machine. He beat the Jeb Bush machine. He beat the whole Bush machine. He beat Marco Rubio machine. He beat the guy from Canada. I can't remember his name right now. He just walked through a field of 17 seasoned deep state candidates and beat them all. I mean, the hand of God, I believe, was on that. And they freaked out, guys, because what they thought Hillary Clinton was going to hands down win this, they were going to make sure. They'd use the hammer, they would use thin thread, they would use whatever they had and all of their wranglings to make sure Hillary Clinton won. And if she won, you had Joe Arpaio they were going to put in a jumpsuit with handcuffs. They were going to take him and put him in jail. All of the media would be there clicking pictures of Joe Arpaio in a jumpsuit and handcuffs. He would be deemed this thug, run-of-the-mill criminal, so that if he ever mentioned birth certificate again, they could say, oh, yeah, look who's talking about the birth certificate, this convicted, lying, criminal, contempt of court, idiot sheriff. That's what they were planning. Hillary Clinton was going to bury everything with the help of James Comey and all of the other deep state guys, and it all fell apart when Donald Trump won the election. And they are terrified that this information is going to come before a congressional committee or a real law enforcement agency of the federal government or a real DOJ. It's all going to be exposed. People would go to prison for the rest of their life over this. The DNC would never win another election in our lifetime and probably in our grandchildren's lifetime. They know this. They're guarding it with their life. They're playing for blood. This is deadly. They're trying to get Trump out before he gains momentum, before he gains the power he needs to bring this to light. Because everything Mike Zullo and I are talking about, Donald Trump knows. People know. There are congressmen that know. There are law enforcement officers that know this. You just have to get the dominoes in place. And in the meantime, the deep state, including high-ranking officials in the FBI, we now know from their texts, they are viciously, desperately trying to take him out of that office. Does that make sense, guys?
What an exquisite, very eloquently done opening statement and closing argument. I cannot think of anything greater, and this ties into everything we're seeing today.
Yes.
And Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio, Carl Gallups laid the foundation, exposing the fraud. The enormity of this is just mind-boggling. Wow.
It's probably the most devastating crime committed against a government in the history of the world. And the reason I would say it like that is because you have to put everything in context. Have other crimes been committed that have been atrocious against government officials and kings and emperors and all that? Of course. Caesar Augustus and and all of that. But the reason I say in the history of the world is because there has never been a more powerful military engine, a more powerful economic engine, a more powerful, blessed, unbelievable nation in history, on the planet. And for it to be usurped by a man using fake ID to run our government, to run our military, to run our economy, and then the whole deep state engine and three-letter government agencies using hacking software go into action to thwart the entire, perhaps, electoral system one way or the other, and to install a man who does not have proper documentation, and then cover it up, to threaten, to obfuscate, to do all they can, media, judges, congressmen, whatever it takes to cover their crime, their potential crime. This is my opinion. That is probably the largest crime ever committed against a government and a nation of people in the history of the planet.
Absolutely. Wow.
It's foundational to everything that's on the news right now.
It is.
Precisely.
And I wonder, as many people have talked about, if Trump, if this was one of the first things he looked into when he got in office. Obviously, he was one of the ones who was brave enough to be very public about this issue when it was so unpopular.
And still is.
He was talking about it during his campaign until the media put pressure on him, and I think Bannon or somebody talked him into saying, look, just say that you believe he was born in the United States and say that's all you're going to say about it, and this will go away so we can win this election. And listen, Mike Zullo and I called each other that night. I told Mike, I said, I agree with what Trump just did. I know it hurts my heart to hear him say it, but he's got to win the office if we're going to get anything done. And if he keeps talking about the birth certificate, they're going to crucify him. And Mike Zullo agreed. So we watched it work, and it worked perfectly. And he's in office. And that's why the deep state is going into action now. They got to get him out of there, guys.
Exactly.
Carl, let me interject something. Here.
Yeah.
As far as Breitbart and Bannon are concerned, obviously there was the death of Mr. Breitbart right as we were doing our first press conference.
Yes.
But I have a personal relationship with someone who was a high-level reporter for Breitbart and was very, very good friends with the deceased. And he told me that Bannon knew all about the birth certificate, and Breitbart were under Bannon. They made a decision not to deal with it, because they didn't want to be tattooed and labeled as birthers. And they have shied away from it ever since. As a matter of fact, Bannon hates this issue, hates it. And I won't tell you how I know that, but trust me, I know it.
Yeah.
He hates this issue, doesn't want it brought up. Now, that's a decision from a news outlet that really could have done something with this.
Yeah.
And elected not to do it.
Yeah.
Because they were fearing of their own reputation,
rather
than looking into this like everybody is looking into Donald Trump right now 24/7, that if the guy fell off the curb, it would be a major breaking story that he fell off because he was drunk or on drugs. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they're doing to him today. What would have happened if they scrutinized Obama like they're scrutinizing Trump right now?
He would have never withstood the scrutiny itself. And of course, just as kind of an end note to this, a November 2017 article in the Business Insider, businessinsider.com, speaks to Donald Trump's continued, even though it's not overt, but subtle implication or inferences about the validity of the document. And it's interesting because I thought of you, Mr. Zullo, in a tweet from Donald Trump, and this is contemporaneous to your investigation, August 6, 2012. An extremely credible source has called my office and told me that certificate is a fraud. That was tweeted out at 3:23 p.m. August 6, 2012, and I thought, could it be? What a wonderful presentation. And you've brought us to the absolute end of the program. Wow, this is for the record books. Man.
It's a shame. It's a shame that we're sitting here talking about this. It's a sin that we're talking about this. This should never be in the United States of America.
Indeed. And I pray that we will see this resolved. Your hard work, both of your hard work, brought back out into the open and exposed. This fraud exposed for what it is. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for appearing on the HAGMANN Report.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Doug and Joe. Thank you, guys. God bless you both.
God bless you.
Thank you. It's an awesome show.
Wow. Folks, that'll do it for us. Spread the word about this particular episode. We owe such a debt of gratitude to Mike Zullo, to Carl Gallups, to Sheriff Arpaio, to every citizen journalist, everyone who has fought for the truth to come out. This is wow. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Until next week, may God bless.